Welcome to episode 2 of the Misfits of Horror podcast. I'm Rick Rebello, and joining me is...
Josh Gravel.
And today we'll be doing another of a little something old and a little something new. We'll be talking about the new movie Sick and the 50th anniversary of The Night Stalker. So, Josh, what would you like to start off with first today?
Well, I feel like our discussion of The Night Stalker could get very rambly.
Sure.
So why don't we just jump right into Sick, so that not that that's going to be a bad discussion. I just have a feeling that us both being nostalgic fellows.
Yes, absolutely.
We could just go on and on and on about Carl Kolchak.
So, all right. So for those of you who don't know, Sick is a new horror movie that has been released on the Peacock streaming service on January 13th. The movie is still marked down as 2022, so I'm assuming it had a limited theatrical run in 2022 and is now on streaming in 2023. The director is John Hyams, written by Kevin Williamson, who is famous for all kinds of other slasher goodness, and I believe the upcoming Friday the 13th television show as well. And it stars Gideon Adlon, Bethlehem Millian, and Dylan Sprayberry. So, Josh, what did you think of Sick?
So I knew pretty much nothing about Sick going into it. I started seeing some ads pop up for it, and all I really knew was that it was a new film written by Kevin Williamson.
Yes.
So popped it on one night, and it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I had heard some hype leading up to it. A lot of other podcast shows were talking about how much they had enjoyed it. I had seen a couple of pictures where they showed both the star of this movie, Gideon Adlon, and her sister, Odessa Azion, who we remember from the Hellraiser film last year.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Showing them as, the sister final girls, the two final girl sisters. Their mom is Pam Adlon, who's been in a million different things in the last 20 years. And they both kind of look like their mom, Pam Adlon.
Yeah.
But I find it fascinating to have both of them into pretty big horror films in the last year. I mean, when you think about it, it's probably 6 months in between Hellraiser and Sick.
Yeah.
But going into it, I did hear it was about, obviously COVID and things happening during COVID. But I was happily surprised to see how they incorporated COVID into a slasher film. What did you think?
I thought that aspect of it worked extremely well.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also, I don't know if you'd say a fortuitous or ironic time to review it, as I am right now currently getting over COVID.
Yes. It kind of just worked out that way.
Yeah.
Probably not the way you would have wanted it to work out, though.
Not really, but no. You know what? I'm fine. I'm over the hump. I'm on the other side of it. I'm feeling better.
Good.
But from the opening of the film, it really, you really kind of got the feeling of the time period it was set.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that time period is literally just 2.5, 3 years ago, but there was a certain attitude and anxiety that was prevalent in the world that you can feel, and it did a good representation of characters who ranged from characters that care too much to characters that don't care at all, to the ones that are just kind of floating in the middle somewhere.
Yeah, and especially even though it's been only a couple of years, I think people have already kind of separated from how things were intense peak COVID. Like that peak period right when we got locked down. There's that great scene in the movie where the woman is coughing in line
Yes.
At the grocery store. And I remember, being at a store wearing my mask and having just a little regular cough and feeling like everyone was staring at me.
Yeah, you just get that little dry throat tickle that happens 4 or 5 times a day.
Yep.
And you cough, and all of a sudden, it's like you walked into an Old West saloon and the music stopped and everybody's looking at you.
Exactly. Yeah. And even the main character and her best friend, the way they're trying to interact with each other at the beginning, not being certain if either one of them has COVID,
Yeah.
and being, very cautious there. They're spraying their pizza boxes and wiping them with, wipes. It just reminds us of how intense things were at that period of time. But then, as things move along pretty quickly in the film, just want to say up front, everybody, there's going to be spoilers because I don't know how to do things without spoilers. Uh, but as one of their former boyfriends or love interest shows up, things start to spin up a little bit, and then we get sort of a Scream style slasher. Well, actually, the film starts off with a slasher kill, if I'm not correct.
Right. So I think actually we should set up. Yes, it does start with a cold open slasher kill, which is something that you need. And for a slasher film, you either need a cold open kill or a past tragedy to open the film.
Yes.
But what we haven't set up is that the crux of this film is that you have two college friends, and with everything shutting down, one of them their family has a lake house that is out in the middle of nowhere. So she is like, you and me, we're gonna go and we're just gonna ride this out at the lake house. We'll stop and buy a bunch of groceries and we'll get out there. So it does a good job of setting up the kind of remote location.
Yes, absolutely.
I think they even mentioned that it's like a couple of miles to the closest neighbor or something like that.
Yeah, so we get that sense of isolation.
Yes. So you're immediately isolated, and given playing off of something that was set up in the cold open, even once they get there, they start getting weird like text messages that they don't quite understand.
Yeah.
And then yes, one of their former boyfriends decides to show up and crash the party. And that quite literally and figuratively opens the door for an intruder.
Yes.
So, since we are going to go spoilery with this, I can bring up something now that also voices my concern with this film. But then the film reversed my opinion in a way. So pretty quickly, once the boyfriend shows up and you were alerted to the fact that there is definitely an intruder, they actually managed to subdue the intruder. And that's when you find out that there are multiple intruders. And at that point, like the reveal of the second intruder, actually, that was the first point where I was like, oh, I'm kind of out of this. Because coming from knowing it was a Kevin Williamson film, I'm like, okay, so people are being menaced via cell phone, and then now there are multiple killers.
Right.
So
wearing hoods.
Yeah, so wearing hoodies and masks, a la, as everybody wore masks early in COVID. So, but you could see where once you hit that like halfway point of the film, my immediate thought was, is he just recycling Scream for the COVID age?
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely say that, but I think the twist that he throws in, about the killers is a good one.
Exactly. So as the film progresses from there, it got me back. You know what I'm saying? Once more was revealed as to what was going on, But I can't help but feeling that that was kind of in a way like the starting point of this project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will say, I mean, it's a pretty standard, as we said earlier, slasher setup
Yeah.
with a really good curveball thrown in by how it integrates COVID and how people behave. And not so much even just COVID, the fact that, and I'm going to get super spoilery here. So if you haven't jumped off the wagon yet and you want a little bit held back, now's a good time to jump off the wagon. So the killer's parents and his brother are the killer. The killer is the parents and son of a boy who was killed because Gideon Adlon had made out with him at a party and given him COVID. So they're trying to get revenge for their son dying of COVID, which, yeah, in this day and time, especially with all of the, political things that have come out of COVID and the anger that people have had about, getting COVID, not getting COVID, wearing a mask, not wearing a mask. Uh, I think it's one of those things where it seems plausible to me that this could happen. Like I wouldn't be shocked if this didn't happen somewhere in the country.
Mm.
We might not know about it, but I wouldn't be surprised if years down the road there isn't an episode of Forensic Files where it's about some parents that went out and killed somebody who gave their son or daughter COVID.
Right.
It wouldn't shock me.
And as I said, as the story progressed and unfolded, it did win me back.
Yeah.
It was just that initial, moment where they reveal that there is more than one killer. That it kind of sucked me out of it for a moment.
Yeah.
But as the kind of conspiracy, you would say, against these girls grows, it definitely becomes more interesting, and it kind of sucks you in a bit.
Yeah, and especially after, she kills their other son.
Yes.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And the stakes just keep going up and up and up and up and up.
Yeah.
I think the reveal with the mom was really good.
Yes.
When she goes to the car and the mom was mad at her for not wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And she thinks she's going to save her. I mean, that's also a classic horror reveal. We've seen it a million times where the person you think is helping you is actually part of the family.
The way in which they subdue and abduct the character, it is ingenious.
Yes.
Works well with the time.
Yes.
Yes. So I mean, it's there's definitely it has a lot of ingenuity and a lot of smart writing.
Mm-hmm. And I think for a low budget streaming film, it's got a lot more quality than a lot of low budget streamers that I've seen in the last couple of years. I think looks better. It's a little bit better set up, a little bit more organized than a lot of direct to stream horrors that I've seen, and even a lot of stuff by Blumhouse, because this is another Blumhouse movie. Yeah. Blumhouse seems to have like a movie out every week now. Have you noticed that?
Well, yeah, because they've got deals with every major streaming service.
Right.
I know this is kind of an offshoot, but I think they had a really good series going, I think called Into the Dark on Hulu.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where for 2 years, they released a movie a month straight to Hulu.
Right, yes.
And not all the movies were great. Most of them were acceptable and enjoyable. Mm-hmm. But what it was that was their way of doing a straight to video,
right,
where it was filmmakers that they wanted to work with but they thought maybe needed more experience, or scripts that they liked but they couldn't rationalize putting a ton of money behind, so they created these other outlets where they could kind of do just straight to streaming product.
Yeah.
And I feel like it there's a lot of interesting stuff coming out of that.
Yeah, I agree. I actually think the plurality of streaming services has kind of given us back the mom and pop video store situation with horror, where they need so much content. And I think that might be a big reason why last year was such a giant year for horror movies.
Yeah.
Because now a lot of horror filmmakers that may not have gotten an opportunity 5 years ago, now these streaming networks are like, we need content, we need content.
Yeah.
And we're getting to see a lot of people get some repetition, get some different films under their belt. Whereas, 5-10 years ago, when they still had to go to the indie DVD market to make movies, there was a huge problem as far as horror filmmakers being able to make films and distribute them and get them out there and eventually get them to streaming. Whereas now the streaming services are coming to them like the mom and pop system was in VHS days, where they're like, give us content. We need content.
Yeah.
What do you got?
Yeah.
And certainly something like this, I think, benefits from that.
Sure.
This is a movie I think that if it came out, 5 years ago, it would have went to the theaters. It would have been like mediocre. It would have got a lukewarm Blu-ray DVD release, and probably not a whole lot would have been said about it, even though it is a little bit better, I think, than average.
Yeah, it probably would have gotten a lot of hype for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then be kind of forgotten about.
Yeah, yeah. And then it would be one of those things where you'd pick it up in a dollar bin somewhere, or at a yard sale and be like, "Oh, this is a pretty good movie,"
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have been that big. Whereas now, I think it's got a little bit more. And I also think the amount of different podcasts and shows that are covering it now, and the fact that places like Shudder and Screambox and everything else, there's horror is finally getting more outlets of discussion, right?
Yeah.
My Twitter now is basically nothing but horror writers and horror filmmakers, and it's almost better than any issue of Fangoria that I ever had, because it's just a matter of watching all these people interact, which is so cool. And that's where I heard about this movie quite a bit. So go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so we've gotten through the whole story.
Yeah.
So I figure I was just going to chime in that I thought the film was very well directed.
Yeah.
And it was very well acted.
Yes.
So they handled everything that was scripted well.
Mm-hmm.
And the twists and turns were all pretty believable.
Yeah, I thought I had never seen Gideon Adlon before. Looking at her IMDb, she's definitely got a lot of credit. She's done a lot of stuff. The director, John Himes, has also done a lot of work. He's done some episodes of Chucky and a few other things. I have to say, we haven't talked about Chucky, the TV series, but for someone who didn't like Chucky initially, I've been really enjoying the series. I actually think they've done a great better. I think that the series is better set up than the original film. I thought was very good and well set up, but after that it kind of went downhill for me. But the series I feel has been pretty well constructed.
I haven't seen a lot of the series, but I've been intending to watch it. I noticed the director, he also worked on that Black Summer show, I believe.
Yes. Yep.
So, yep. And the only thing I think I had seen the actress in was she was in that Craft reboot.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, she was in the reboot. She was something else called Witch Hunt.
Yeah.
A couple of other things. And like I said, her sister was in the new Hellraiser film, which I think both of us liked to some extent.
Yeah, no, I thought that Hellraiser film from last year was really good.
Yeah. I still wanted it to be a little grittier for some reason. I don't know why. I think it's those films for some reason that are all shot in Eastern Europe for me.
Yeah.
And they're always shot at like somebody's castle. I don't know why it just doesn't work for me that much. Like I still like Hellraiser in like somebody's dirty apartment. That's my idea of Hellraiser for some reason.
I don't know, that mansion seemed pretty dirty to me.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So yeah, if you get a chance and you're out there and you're looking for something good to stream, Sick is on Peacock. So if you already got a subscription, it's free. So go check it out.
Yeah, I
And
would definitely recommend it.
yeah, it's a fun little slasher, especially if you're looking for a new slasher film and you've already watched, last year's Scream and you're waiting for this year's Scream. This is a pretty good in-betweener while you're waiting for that. I know I'm actually waiting a little bit more to see Kevin Williams' take on Friday the 13th. That I'm a little bit more interested in. But hopefully we'll get that soon. I know there's going to be a competing Friday the 13th show and or film as well, because I believe Sean Cunningham has got the rights to do something else with Friday the 13th. So it should be interesting to see what happens there.
Head to head, Friday the 13th.
Yeah, that's fine. We haven't seen anything since what, 2013?
I think so.
What do they put out, like 5 Halloween movies since the last time we saw Friday the 13th?
I think so.
It certainly feels that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. Now, is one of these Friday the 13th going to be a reboot of the TV series?
I don't even know. I mean, at this point, it's like anything's up for grabs. You know what I mean? You can't put anything past Hollywood right now as far as rehashing stuff goes. So we'll have to see how it goes. But something that was already rehashed and not done well. We're going to talk about the classic version as we're coming up on the 50th, or not coming up, we passed the 50th anniversary, is The Night Stalker. So, Josh, tell me about your feelings about the Night Stalker, the original pilot film.
I think it is a low-key masterpiece.
Yeah.
I mean, now I know back in the day, the concept of the made-for-TV movie was a much bigger deal than it became. Back in the 70s, there was a lot of like highly touted made-for-TV films.
Correct. Yeah.
But by the time we were growing up in the 80s, the made-for-TV film was kind of a joke.
Yes.
But Kolchak the Night Stalker is a fantastic piece of kind of, I would say, all ages horror cinema in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It is the type of horror movie the whole family can sit around the TV and watch.
Yeah.
And a lot of families in 1972 did. And you could see that by the amazing influence that this show, a show that got canceled after one season, has been tremendously influential on horror for the last 50 years.
Yeah.
So just to go by the numbers, directed by John Llewellyn Moxley, written by Richard Matheson, Jeffrey Rice, and Max Hodge. Richard Matheson, I recently just rewatched Hell House.
Mm-hmm.
And Matheson, of course, famously wrote Hell House. He wrote I Am Legend, right?
Yes.
So written by one of the absolute greatest horror writers of the 20th century.
Yeah.
And of course, starring the amazing Darren McGavin, yes, who everybody knows and loves from, of course, A Christmas Story. Mm-hmm. Even though Josh and I will be the first ones to go, no, we love him from The Night Stalker.
Yeah.
Not that we don't like A Christmas Story. It's a classic, and we love Bob Clark. Mm-hmm. But when we think about Darren McGavin, we think of him in his seersucker suit.
Oh, yes.
Fighting vampires.
Mm-hmm. Or all sorts of supernatural beings.
Yeah. And that's the fun of The Night Stalker, Yeah.
And the director, John Llewellyn Moxley, no slouch in the horror department there.
Nope, not at all.
I mean, the man who directed, Horror Hotel?
Yep.
Yep.
He definitely has his bona fides. He's worked a lot in television.
Yep.
Throughout like 30 or 40 years, did everything from Murder, She Wrote, yep, to Jake and the Fat Man, you know what I mean, to Matlock, Magnum PI. He covered his bases,
Oh yeah.
But yeah, absolutely, and definitely someone who's up to this task. Because the movie looks beautiful. I mean, it's very well shot. It's funny because you could definitely see the change of quality when they went from the 2 movies to the actual TV show.
Yes, yeah.
Things definitely got cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they moved Kolchak from Vegas to Chicago.
Yeah.
For the series. But this is a beautiful film. It's definitely, you can't just look at it as a TV film. As a film in general, it looks great.
Yeah. So the Night Stalker was 72, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was one of the highest rated TV movies ever at the time.
Yep.
So in '73, they followed it with The Night Strangler,
Mm-hmm.
which found Kolchak relocated to Seattle, and now on the trail of a different supernatural being.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that made for TV movie also a tremendous hit.
Yep.
So then I think it was 1974, the following year, when they did the TV series. But I think going from 2 TV movies to an entire series, you can definitely tell it feels rushed.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and yeah, once again, because you're going from movies to series, that budget's going to get cut, considerably. And even then, Kolchak's an expensive show to shoot back then because of the supernatural elements and all the moving pieces that come into play. And I don't know for sure if it was canceled due to ratings or it's one of those shows that was canceled because it just cost too much to produce. The other day I was rewatching Werewolf, the Fox television show, which ironically steals from the Night Stalker because the villain in Werewolf is also called Giannis Skorzeny, which is the name of the villain in the Night Stalker. And Werewolf, the 1986 Fox show, was canceled not because of bad ratings. It had tremendous ratings. It was canceled because it cost too much to produce.
And I believe now has been in home video limbo because of music rights.
Yeah, because there's a lot of because back then was the time of like Miami Vice and everything else.
Yeah.
There's a lot of music drops. I mean, the show literally starts off with "Can You Hear Me" by Mike and the
Mechanics. Yeah.
And there's music drops throughout the episodes.
Yeah.
The good thing for us is that you can watch the entire series for free on YouTube. while it's in that gray market limbo.
Yes.
But once again, I definitely got a laugh the other day when I was watching it, and I remember that Chuck Connor's character was called Giannis Scorsese.
So Mike White from the Projection Booth podcast.
Yeah.
He did an entire separate podcast, I think, called the Kolchak Files.
Oh, nice.
And in which, in every episode, they covered a different episode of Kolchak. And they talked to a couple of people, like writers on the show and stuff. And I believe they said that ultimately the problem with the series was ratings, but it was also because the network didn't know what to do with it and kept moving it.
Right.
So it never really kind of got a good hold on an audience.
Well, it's such a strange show because when networks look at it, they say, what is it and who's it for?
Yeah.
Because there's no definitive demographic that it's reaching out to.
Mm-hmm.
And what's great about the character of Carl Kolchak and why I think I love him and a lot of other people love him is that he really is just this like middle-aged slouch. He's not particularly handsome or rich or anything else, and yet he gets to fight monsters and werewolves and satanic dogs and all these other things.
Well, also ultimately, it's the hard-boiled detective model.
Right. Exactly.
Where he is the down on his luck, hard-boiled detective.
Yeah.
But instead of being double-crossed by a femme fatale,
mm-hmm.
Who wants to steal some money or something, it's he's discovering a vampire,
right,
or a swamp creature, or an alien.
And Darren McGavin did play Mike Hammer for
Yes.
a short period of time, so.
And he uses the same pattern, that fast talking, quick insults, very like kind of catchy, funny, and quirky speech patterns and sayings.
Yeah. But he nails, just like he does in Christmas Story, he nails that feeling of being an everyman.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the big attraction here. It's that it's just an everyman fighting all this stuff.
Right.
And I think that's why the character still works today.
Yeah.
You know, because it could be any guy that you know that all of a sudden gets put in this situation where he's got to deal with this stuff.
Right. And the great thing is, like, so as much as we're watching the show and you love him as a character, he's also, like, objectively, he's not a likable guy.
Right. Right.
Like, if you watch him, you're like, oh, this guy is a jerk.
Right.
Like, he's constantly talking down to everybody in the room. Now, granted, a lot of times he has information that everybody needs, but, like, he's never good at conveying that information.
No, he's not perfect. He's not a perfect person. You know what I mean? He's likable and unlikable.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which makes him makes him a lot more complicated than the characters of his time. And I think that's one of the beauties of Karl Kolchak is that for that period of time on television, he's got a lot of different things going on. You know what I mean? He's not a straightforward good guy. He's not really a bad guy. You know, he's an every guy. He's not a handsome guy. He's not a young guy. You know, so there's all these different dynamics at play here.
Yeah.
And I think for those of us who love horror, it's also interesting to see them taking that character taking horror seriously.
Yes.
You know, and that's one of the fascinating things about the show is like everyone else still thinks he's being ridiculous. Oh, come on, vampires? What are you talking about? What do you think this is? You know what I mean? But he takes it seriously, you know?
Yeah.
And for horror fans, I think that's something we've been attracted to is that, you know, we think that people don't take the stuff we love seriously. And we're out there trying to say, no, 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 this is serious. This is good stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Carl's out there fighting the good fight with us. So I think that's why we identify with him.
Yeah. So it's also worth noting what an influence, because so once we got into the series, it did become kind of the monster of the week.
Yeah.
Where every week, usually around Chicago, but they were smart enough that every once in a while they would, you know, send Kolchak to cover like the launch of a new cruise line. So
I was just about to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Or they sent him out to LA to interview like a celebrity, and he stumbled across, you know, something there, things like that. Yeah. So they did branch out a little bit, but it was mostly set around Chicago, and it was just him constantly stumbling into these weird news stories where once he dug a little bit deeper, it turned into something supernatural. Right. And this is most notably important for being the influence on the X-Files.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean the whole concept of the X-Files where you have, you know, Mulder's a serious person, but he sees these insane things and he's trying to convince everyone, and Scully especially, that it's not a joke. You know, this is real stuff.
Right.
You know, Kolchak's always dealing with that with his boss, you know, and definitely that, you know, we see it there. I just told you about Werewolf being another one that was influenced by it. So many other shows have shown that not as much as the X-Files. The X-Files is almost, you know, a perfect. The X-Files is kind of a combination of the Night Stalker and the Invaders, a show from the late 1960s.
Sure.
You know, it grabs its UFO stuff from the Invaders, and then it grabs its investigative stuff from Kolchak, which I have to say, if you're going to merge two shows, I give Chris Carter credit because those are two great shows to mix together.
And with the X-Files, they were upfront about it the entire time. I can't remember the character's name, but there's an episode where Mulder got to meet the agent who founded the X-Files.
Yep.
And it's played by Darren McGavin.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the last seasons too, one of the not villains, but one of the aliens.
Oh yes, was dressed as
Kolchak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought was fabulous. You know, he even had the little camera on a leather strap over his arm, as if anybody in 2022 would be running around with an old-fashioned camera on a leather strap.
Right.
You know. But it's just so good. I mean, I think that's why, he survived. I was part of the Kickstarter recently that James Aquilone did to do the 50th anniversary Night Stalker comic and book, where he solicited stories from authors and illustrators to make a novel and a comic of the Night Stalker. And it's amazing, how many people participated in that, and how much love there still is, And I think the fact that, Carl wears a seersucker suit, which looks nothing like what a horror guy would look like. I mean, he is the antithesis of the Hot Topic horror fan. He got a blue and white pinstripe, seersucker suit with that straw hat.
Yeah.
He would be ostracized at any horror convention that we went to. If we didn't know that was a famous character, we'd be like, "What's this nerd doing up there?"
And I know you mentioned the recent Kickstarter, and that is so. Besides the attempted relaunch of the series, that was a flop.
Oh God, thank God it flopped because it was horrible.
Yeah, on it, I didn't watch past the first episode, but my impression was that they tried turning it into more of a cross between the X-Files and Supernatural.
Yeah.
And like sucked all the fun out of it.
Yeah, they had Stuart Townsend as Kolchak, and Stuart Townsend. I mean, I think he must have had pictures of somebody because I don't know why that guy. I know he was dating Charlize Theron for like a hot minute, but I don't understand why he got into this stuff, and certainly I don't understand how the hell they hired him to be Carl Kolchak. It's like, did you guys watch the original show? Like, do you even get? Like I said, the whole point of Carl Kolchak is that he's the every guy. He's not a South African male model.
Right.
Okay.
But so besides that, which, like I said, I can't really comment on because I only watched the first episode.
Yeah.
But the Carl Kolchak character has lived on now for years in novels and comic books.
Yeah.
There are dozens of miniseries and different paperbacks out there based off of the character, which is great that it is continuing to this day.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's because as horror fans, we grow up wishing we would be Van Helsing, and we wish we had these beautiful long leather coats and stakes. But in reality, we're just regular guys and girls. And Kolchak represents us in that way, because we're not dressed up in, $10,000 worth of leather and knives and spikes. He could just be someone we identify with, even though none of us wear seersucker suits and straw hats. But just the fact that it's weird, like it's uncommon. You know what I mean?
Right.
He's not trying to impress anybody. And I think that horror fans have that feeling where we're not out there to impress anybody. We're out there to do what we do.
So from the series, do you have a favorite episode?
From the actual TV series, I do like the one with the werewolf. It's funny you said that, the werewolf on the cruise line.
Yeah.
Played by he was a soap opera actor. I'm trying to think of his name, but he played Victor on The Young and the Restless for like literally 30 years. But I love the original film with the vampire.
Yeah.
Tremendous, and the Night Strangler also very good. And the other ones, it's kind of tough for me. There's so many different. There's sort of some ups and downs, and some things that I think are great, and some things that are not great. But that's when you get a series of TV, you're going to have good episodes and bad episodes. It's just sad that we didn't have more episodes to work with.
Right. So I'm going to go as far as like favorite episode, the Spanish Moss Murders.
Okay.
Because I always thought that was one of the more interesting, quirky ones.
Mm-hmm.
And with a bit of a nod to one of the lesser episodes that is not one of the good episodes, but is a lot of fun,
Hmm.
and that is Chopper. And that is the one that reimagines the headless horseman myth on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Also, that one was written by Robert Zemeckis.
Really? Oh man, that one got past me. All right. Oh man, but that's the thing is that you had all this. Well, the other good thing about Kolchak is the time that it was made, where you could get someone like Robert Zemeckis working on it, and you could get uh, someone like Richard Matheson writing it. You
Yeah,
know
yeah.
that you'd have all these amazing actors and actresses that they were able to pull from at that time, and it's just phenomenal stuff that you couldn't do otherwise. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's one of the other things. And like I said, I wish that they had more time. You
Right.
know, I wish that. Yeah, I don't think we didn't get a Steven Spielberg episode, but it was right around the time that he was directing
Yeah.
television, right before pre Jaws.
True.
You know,
True.
it's actually Spielberg was directing Columbo at the time, which is kind of fascinating. But yeah, I just wish there was more. I wish there was more to work with.
I agree. I agree. But hey, at least we have what we have.
We do. And for those who don't know, Josh has got a beautiful oil painting up in his house
Yeah.
that we found at Rocket Shock one year that somebody made of Darren McGavin as the Night Stalker. And it's one of the things of all the things that Josh owns. And let me tell you, when it comes to horror stuff, Josh owns freaking everything. All right.
Would
That
say
is
not a lot.
almost everything, right? And that is one of the things that every time I go to his house, I'm like, damn, I'm jealous of that painting. Boy, that's good shit.
uh,
I ended up buying a Night of the Living Dead painting from the same painter,
yeah.
but I'll always be jealous of that Kolchak one because I was like, oh shit, that was good.
It's the same person I got my Halloween 3 painting from.
Yeah, that person was good. I wish I could go back in time with some more money and buy up more of the stuff they had.
Me too.
But
I
you,
I
if you
tried
and I,
emailing them
oh,
uh,
did you?
afterward to see if they had anything left over or whatnot, but I just never heard back.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah. Yeah, because it's so funny. You and I have been going to horror cons now. Jesus, together we've been going to horror cons for 20 years, and you've been going to horror cons a lot longer than that. And I know
Yeah.
I've been going prior to that as well. But if we could go back in time, the money I would spend just on cheap autographs
Uh,
versus what they cost now would be
I know.
insane. You know, we had. It's the funny things we look back and we had at the time. Sometimes you have no idea of the people that you're around and the cool stuff that you get to see.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but now you need a small business loan every time you go to a con. So,
Uh,
all right. So, any closing thoughts on Kolchak, Josh?
um, it's just Kolchak is just such a fun and irreverent character
Yeah,
that just no matter what my mood is, I can throw on an episode or one of the movies, and
absolutely.
so um, if somebody's listening and they're just not familiar with Kolchak at all, um, I think the series is also available on Peacock.
Hmm.
So this is the Peacock episode.
Yeah.
Um, I know I'm not sure if the two TV movies are streaming anywhere, but I know the TV movies in recent years got Blu-ray releases through Kino, so they're out there. Definitely look them up.
Yeah, beautiful transfers, and if you buy the whole series on DVD or Blu-ray, it's not expensive either. It's not very
Yeah,
costly. You know, you can get the whole series for like $20.
yeah. So
Hey,
yeah, go check out Kolchak.
yeah, absolutely. One last thing I wanted to add before we go is that we talked about so many things, but about the movie itself,
Oh
it's
yes.
also one of the more interesting takes on vampires.
Mm,
It's definitely, and especially for 1972, at that time you had basically, you know, the Bela Lugosi traditional vampire. You had Barnabas Collins, which makes sense because the show was also
Curtis.
co-produced by Dan Curtis,
Yep.
and this was like a totally different take from any of those traditional vampires. So it's pretty cool. Like I have to say, Giannis Scorsese is a pretty fascinating character.
Yeah, yeah.
Even though the makeup I thought was a little on the cheap side. you know, uh, but if you're just into vampires in general, you will get a kick out of this as well. Especially the idea of a vampire just running around Las Vegas.
Yes, yeah.
Which for the time and even for now is still pretty wild. So, all right, well that wraps up episode 2. I
Yes.
hope you folks have enjoyed this discussion. Please come back again and check out some of our other discussions. As always, we'll be talking about a new film and an old film. So hopefully we can introduce you to something new and perhaps introduce you to something old if you hadn't heard about it.
Yeah, and at this point, I can't imagine there's many people listening that don't know one of us through social media or
Yeah.
something. So, if you have any questions or comments or suggestions, just reach out to Rick or I and let us know.
Yeah, we'll be happy to talk about anything horror.
Yeah.
So there's basically no horror film or horror topic that Josh and I would shy away from. We've tried as hard as we can to see and listen and read everything in the last 40 years. So chances are we got some sort of opinion on it if it's horror.
If between the two of us, one of us will have an opinion.
Yeah. One of us will have opinion. One of us will know what it is, which is usually Josh, because as much as I pride myself on my knowledge of horror, Josh will always beat me 9 times out of 10 when it comes to something esoteric in any type of horror universe. So
I'll be the obscure movie guy. You do a lot more reading than I do. So
yeah. Well, we'll get to that at some point. So
yeah.
all right. So without further ado, thank you all very much for listening. I'm Rick Rebello.
And I'm Josh Gravel.
And we are the Misfits of Horror.